In this video, I'll be explaining exactly what I do to collect Watch for Rolling Rocks in 0.5 A presses, but there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. First, we need to clear something up, because every time I post a half A press video, which is a necessary part of getting the star, I get the same comments over and over asking where that's useful or important, even though I always have a whole paragraph in the description explaining it, which even starts with, if you're wondering where that's useful or important, read this before commenting to ask, which is a necessary part of getting the star. But maybe what you guys need isn't a paragraph, maybe you guys need an example. So, consider Wing Mario over the rainbow, not even the whole star. Just consider getting to that cannon platform. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. So, how many A presses does it take to get there? Well, if you say 0, that's wrong, because then Mario can't go far enough. If you say 1, well, it's true that Mario can get there with 1, but we can do a little better. We can do it in half an A press. To do that, we start the level already holding A, and then we use that A press to reach the platform. Now, hold on. I know what you're thinking. An A press is an A press. You can't say it's only a half. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important. TJ, Henry, Yoshi, hear me out. An A press actually has 3 parts to it. When A is pressed, when A is held, and when A is released. And together, this forms one complete A press. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. Now, usually it's the pressing that's not useful or important, because that's the only part that makes Mario jump. However, sometimes it's sufficient to just use the holding part, which allows Mario to jump, and as for the release, it's a necessary part of getting the star. Now, if we map out the required A presses for Wing Mario over the rainbow, it would look like this. We merely need to hold A to reach the cannon platform, we need to press A to launch from the first cannon, and we need to press A again to launch from the second cannon. So, how many A presses is that total? Well, it appears to be 3, and if we were doing this star in isolation, then yeah, it would be 3. But, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important. In a full game A button challenge run, there are other A presses that occur earlier in the run, such as this A press needed to get into the course. So, if we take that A press into consideration as well, then how many A presses would it take? Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. The naive answer would be 4, 1 to enter the course, and the 3 within the course that we established earlier. However, we can do better. We can actually do it in 3 by simply holding out the first A press to be used for the half A press, because the half A press only required A to be held, not actually pressed. So in this fashion, Wing Mario over the rainbow only adds on an additional 2 A presses to the run, since the first A press just leeches off of a previous A press. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. So to capture this phenomenon, we call it 2.5 A presses. On a single star basis, you'd round that up to 3, but in a full game run, you'd round it down to 2. So, in conclusion, since that first A press counts in some contexts, but adds no additional A presses in other contexts, we refer to it as a half A press. So, going back to the video, you can see that I start the level with the A button already held, as indicated in the bottom left corner. And so in the full game run, this A press will just leech off of a previous one, and so it won't incur an additional A press. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. Okay, glad that's explained. Now, what am I doing in the video? Here, I'm using a trick called Scuttlebug Transportation. You see, like most enemies, Scuttlebugs have a home, which is just a point in 3D space, and they'll patrol a certain radius around that point. So, if Mario enters that radius, they'll lunge at him to attack. But there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. Unlike most other enemies, a Scuttlebug's home can change positions, because if a Scuttlebug bumps into Mario, the Scuttlebug's home will update to where the Scuttlebug was when the collision occurred. So, by strategically luring the Scuttlebug to the edge of its radius and bumping into it, we can effectively transport the Scuttlebug and its home. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. So that's what I'm doing here. Note that we can't actually transport a scuttlebug to outside of its native room. They actually get stuck at the door. So, if your dream was to bring all the scuttlebugs together for one big jamboree, I'm sorry, but there's currently no cases where that's useful or important. Also worth noting is that scuttlebugs will actually disappear if they walk into a wall while too far below their current home. So I do have to be careful to avoid that. It's pretty weird if you've never seen it before, but I'm pretty sure they did it so that if a scuttlebug jumps into a hole, it wouldn't just walk around down there, which is a necessary part of getting the star. Anyway, I'm transporting the scuttlebug to the corner right below the Watch for Rolling Rocks star, because next I do a trick called scuttlebug raising, and here's how it works. On the left, I show a bird's eye view of the scene, and on the right, I show a view from the side. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part.
Now, when Mario leaves the Rolling Rocks room, the scuttlebug deactivates. That's because the room and everything in it are only active when Mario's in the room, or standing in a small region right outside the door, indicated here in yellow. So, if Mario isn't in the Rolling Rocks room or in the yellow region, then the room will be completely black, and everything in the room will be invisible and won't move. Conveniently, this allows us to raise the scuttlebug by performing the following steps. First, Mario enters the scuttlebug's radius. Although the scuttlebug is invisible and can't move around, it can still turn towards Mario and activate a lunge.
Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important.
Then, Mario leaves the radius and the scuttlebug returns to facing its home. Next, Mario enters the yellow region to activate the scuttlebug. The scuttlebug will perform the lunge that it started, but cleverly, we have Mario exit the yellow region right when the scuttlebug is at the peak of its trajectory, thereby deactivating it so it won't fall down. And finally, since the scuttlebug moves past its home, it turns around to face its home once more. Now, we've gotten all the height we could out of the scuttlebug's current lunge.
Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. But that's no problem, because we can just activate another lunge by repeating this procedure. Activate a lunge while the scuttlebug is deactivated, reactivate the scuttlebug just for the upwards portion of its trajectory, and then repeat. As simple as that. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. So that's what I do here, and I have a second screen to show it from the scuttlebug's perspective, which is a necessary part of getting the star.
Fortunately, the scuttlebug's radius isn't a sphere, but a cylinder that extends up and down infinitely. So really, no matter how high the scuttlebug gets, we can continue to enter its area to activate its lunges and move it upwards. There's no limit to how high we can raise it. Now, it's worth noting that I only activate the scuttlebug while I'm not inside its radius, so the scuttlebug will always lunge towards its home and not towards Mario. This causes the scuttlebug to effectively travel straight up above its home.
Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part.
But alternatively, I could have activated the scuttlebug while inside of its radius, and in that case, the scuttlebug would always lunge towards Mario instead of towards its home, so it would actually make its way towards the door and then travel straight up from there. That method's actually a little faster because we wouldn't have to wait for the scuttlebug to turn back towards its home before each activation. However, it wouldn't work for what we're doing because we need the scuttlebug to be right next to that corner. In fact, the top of that corner has a special property which we call a misalignment. Basically, in the game's code, there's a discrepancy between the way the game handles collision checking with floors versus walls. This results in a 1x1 unit area where Mario can get under the floor without being pushed away by the walls.
And if Mario's less than 79 units under a floor, he'll snap right up onto it. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part.
So that'll be important later for getting up there. Anyway, now it's time to build up some speed, and I mean a lot of speed. So to get that speed, we're going to use a trick called hyperspeed walking, and here's how it works. You probably already know that there are some slopes in the game that are too steep to stand on. Mario just slides off of them. But did you know that you actually can stand on these slopes if they're submerged in shallow water? In fact,
the underwater portion of these slopes has a special property. If you try running uphill on them, you'll end up running backwards at an increasing speed with no upper bound. But in most circumstances, this would cause us to end up in the water before building up any real speed, which is a necessary part of getting the star.
we can get a little more speed by running nearly parallel to the slope, but ever so slightly uphill. But eventually the slope runs out, or we move too fast around the corner. But there are some ways to have Mario walk while staying in place. For example, if there's a wall perpendicular to the slope, then we can use that. That allows Mario to build up quite a bit of speed before he breaks through. However, if the wall isn't perpendicular to the slope, then we end up sliding down into the water. That's because walls are really just rectangles that push Mario out perpendicularly. So if Mario moves into a wall at an angle, the game will calculate his intended next position, then the wall will push that position out, and then Mario ends up having a net movement along the wall.
So ultimately, he'll end up moving into the water. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part.
So, is all hope lost? Well, no, because Tyler Taney figured out that we can actually make use of the gate. You see, the bottom of the gate is a ceiling, and the game doesn't like putting Mario too close to the area right under a ceiling because it doesn't think he fits.
So, if we have Mario move backwards into the ceiling, the game will choose not to move him, so we're free to build up speed in place. But not infinite speed, because we'd end up breaking free if our speed moved past the gate, which is a necessary part of getting the star. So what do?
To redirect their speed out of bounds, notice that we now have enough speed so that our intended next position is past the wall and out of bounds. And since the game doesn't like placing Mario out of bounds, it doesn't move him, and instead just lets him stay in place, just like the ceiling. But unlike the ceiling, out of bounds almost goes on forever.
So we can essentially build up as much speed as we want without having to worry about breaking free. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. 12 hours. In other words, Mario's position can basically be any decimal number, but it's converted to an integer between negative 32,768 and positive 32,767 inclusive. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important. So if Mario is standing way over here where there's no land, but the position used for floor detection is on land, can he stand over here? The answer is there's currently no cases where that's useful or important. As far as the game sees it, Mario is in fact above land over here because the game actually checks for land over here. So, for all intents and purposes, there is essentially land over here, a copy of the original map, and this is what we call a parallel universe, or a PU. And this applies to every one of these boxes, so there's actually a grid of nearly infinite PUs. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. Here is a to-scale diagram of the PU grid. As you can see, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important. The PUs are actually pretty far apart, but I'll be taking some creative liberties and drawing them closer together for the sake of clearer visuals. Now, PUs aren't as glamorous as you might think. The graphics are only found on the original map, so the PUs are completely invisible. Furthermore, PUs have no objects, like elevators or item blocks, no enemies, no items, like coins or stars, and not even any walls, so really, it's pretty barren. Furthermore, the N64 console will actually crash if you go to a PU and let the camera follow you, which is a necessary part of getting the star. For simplicity, we call this quadruple PU distance 1Q PU. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. Now, up until this point, I've been glossing over a very important detail, which I now need to clear up. What if I told you the distance Mario moves isn't useful or important? Look how fast Mario moves at 31 speed on this flat slope, and now compare it to how fast. And this portion depends on the slope of the ground. The steeper the slope, the smaller this portion is. Note that it only depends on the steepness, not whether Mario's facing uphill, downhill, or sideways on the hill. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. When we have that speed, the quarter steps of the de facto speed sync up with the PUs, and we can move. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. Now, keep in mind that I can only build up speed while I'm on the hyperspeed walking slope. Once I leave it, I can't generate any more speed, so my speed will only decrease from there. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. So is this route just impossible? Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. By itself, that still won't be enough height, but the scuttlebug we positioned will provide the extra bounce we need. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. So, by using the slopes of those 6 triangles, we can complete the blueprint for our route, allowing us to utilize the first sinking speed of that initial slope, so building up speed only takes 12 hours instead of 25. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. Now, we're almost ready to go back to the video, but there's just some final points I want to make. For example, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part.
Now, based off what I've told you, you might think you can only travel multiples of 4 PUs at a time, but that's not actually true. For example, if one of your quarter steps is out of bounds or over a ceiling, then that quarter step will be invalid, and since Mario moves up to but not including the first invalid quarter step, he can in fact end up stopping prematurely at one of the quarter steps.
Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. Separately, if you change slopes during a quarter step, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important. Finally, now, if you become QPU misaligned, you'll need to correct that in order to return to the main map. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. Just kidding, first I need to explain what these screens are. These extra screens will help you follow along during the PU movement, which is a necessary part of getting the star.
The standard view is just the view that the game shows, but since I fixed the camera on the main map to prevent the game from crashing, this screen won't tell you very much. The relative view shows where I am in each PU. This is what it would look like if I let the camera follow Mario around, and if PUs weren't invisible. The relative map also shows where I am in each PU, but from an overhead perspective. And finally, the PU map shows where I am in the PU grid.
Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part.
Okay, so now let's really start. So, as I explained earlier, I navigate up the path from the lake using the 6 triangles I isolated, and I've marked them in the relative map so you can follow along. So basically, I get onto a triangle, let my speed drop until I'm around the sinking speed for that triangle slope, then navigate uphill on the triangle, and then move to the next triangle. Using what I taught you, you should be able to
Follow along with my movement. Don't worry about that part.
For example, I'm able to move relatively backwards because I have slightly more than the sinking speed. Whenever I move sideways, it's because I'm slightly angled away from the cardinal direction. And every time I move from triangle to triangle, my QPU alignment changes. But cleverly, I planned it in such a way that they'd all cancel out by the end, and I'd end up QPU aligned.
Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. By holding A, I can press B to do these little kicks. Without these kicks, I go through the elevator, which is a necessary part of getting the star. But with the kicks, I can ride it up to gain precious height. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. Okay, so now we're closing in on the end. The final movement I do will be a kick onto the amazing emergency exit platform, then turn and launch myself towards the scuttlebug. That movement will bring me 10 PU to the right and 3 PU down, but since I want to end up on the main map, I reverse that displacement and so position myself 3 PU up and 10 PU left. While doing that, I simultaneously position myself in the correct relative part of the map to make the movement work. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. Okay, now don't blink. And there we go. By bouncing on the scuttlebug and ground pounding in the misalignment, I achieved just enough height to get onto the Rolling Rocks platform. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part.
Here, I've shown a bridge version of the scuttlebug raising, in case earlier's viewing was too choppy to follow. As you can see, the scuttlebug moves back and forth above its home. At the end, you can see I do 2 special raisings, purely moving sideways and closer to the corner, since he ended up being too far away for the bounce to work. And here, I show an alternate angle of the final PU movement. The scuttlebug actually became active once I entered the PU version of this room, so I really only had a handful of frames to get over here before he fell too far.
And there you have it. Watch for Rolling Rocks done in 0.5 A presses. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important. Man, I did not expect this video to become only a half long when I started commentating, but I guess there was just that much to explain. Well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. Hopefully, you were able to follow along with my explanations and visuals, learn something new, and had an enjoyable experience. So,
thanks for watching.